Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Rocco. Thanks for finding your way back here, guys. And today we're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite jazz fusion albums by one of my all-time favorite jazz fusion bands. That's right, we're talking about 1974's Where Have I Known You Before by classic band Return to Forever. Probably at the moment, my favorite jazz fusion band. It seems like every album I hear by these guys is just a stone cold classic. And, I couldn't resist talking about this one, guys. It's been a while since I reviewed Romantic Warrior. And I've just been listening to this album so much ever since. And it's grown on me to the point where I'd put it like almost on par with Romantic Warrior. I still prefer that album a little bit. I mean, come on, that title track is one of the best songs ever written. But this song here is not far behind. And I freaking love this album. It's just, in my opinion, from the three Return to Forever albums I've heard so far, which were Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, the one preceding this, and obviously this album, and then Romantic Warrior. This one is the most well-balanced. This one has the best of both worlds. It has the progginess, the experimentation of Romantic Warrior, but it retains the jazziness and rockin' vibe of the previous album, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. And yeah, it's just a perfect combination of those two albums. But it's more than that. It has its own distinct sound. I mean, no other Return to Forever album that I've heard so far has this dreamy, beautiful, kind of warm atmosphere that this album brings. This is a very atmospheric album. And, it still has all the elements you've come to love from Return to Forever. The blistering Al Di Meola guitar solos, Lenny White's fuzzy, amazing bass playing, and of course Chick Corea's incredible virtuosic synthesizer and keyboard solos. But there's this warmth to it, this beauty to it, this refined kind of nature to it, where it just strikes the perfect balance and adds a hint of elegance to it. It's a very elegant album, and we'll get into that more when I talk about the review. But yeah, when I heard this album, it did take a while to grow on me compared to Romantic Warrior, which was just in your face, a perfect fusion of progressive rock and jazz fusion. This one here was, a little bit more subtle. It took a little bit of more time to get into. The melodies weren't as punchy, as energetic as the ones on Romantic Warrior, or as over the top. I mean, it's a classic, but it's an over-the-top album. I mean, sometimes Chick Corea just goes a little bit too crazy with the synthesizers. If that's not your kind of thing, you might not like that album. But this one here, I think it's just the perfect amount. And it was the first album where he started using synthesizers. So that's really notable. And it was the first album with guitarist Al Di Meola, one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, when I first heard this album, I remember the very first time I heard it, I considered it kind of like a second-tier kind of album next to Romantic Warrior, because the melodies, aren't as direct, aren't as in-your-face and over-the-top as that album. But, with more time and digestion, man, this album has fully revealed itself to me, and it's now become one of my all-time favorite jazz fusion albums. Honestly, I would put this right up there with Birds of Fire by Mahavishnu Orchestra, Headhunters by Herbie Hancock, freaking Hot Rats by Frank Zappa. I'm trying to think of all my favorites right now. Crossings by Herbie Hancock. Like, this is one of the all-time greats. And yeah, it's just grown on me ever since. And I love how it has its own distinct sound. It doesn't have a totally different sound than the other albums, but when you hear this album, when you hear a song on this album, oh yeah, that's from Where Have I Known You Before. And it just has that distinct quality to it. So excellent album, and I can't wait to dive in, guys. So let's talk a little bit about the history, because there was a major lineup change on this album, and Chick Corea started using synthesizers. So a lot of developments on this one, guys. So let's dive right in. All right, guys, sorry for the abrupt change of scenery. Just felt like coming outside. It's very nice today. But yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the history behind Where Have I Known You Before. And so if you guys don't know about Return to Forever, just a brief kind of introduction to them. They're one of the premier jazz fusion bands of the early 70s, formed by Chick Corea, and I think 1971. And if you guys don't know who Chick Corea is, you got to know this guy. He's one of the all-time greatest keyboard players, along with Herbie Hancock, probably the two biggest keyboard names in the jazz fusion genre. He played with Miles Davis on his genre-defining album, Bitches Brew. And yeah, he's just one of the all-time greatest keyboard players. Very progressive rock oriented, so if you like more of the prog kind of synthesizer stuff from the early 70s, you're definitely going to love Chick Corea, whereas Herbie Hancock definitely steers a little bit more towards the jazzier side, the more conventional, funky side. He does get very avant-garde and experimental as well, but Chick Corea really goes for those over-the-top synthesizer solos. And yeah, and the rest of the band just really made a huge name for themselves in the 70s. One of the most commercially successful jazz fusion acts as well. So if you're getting into this genre, this is one of the first bands you guys have to listen to. There's no excuse. And I definitely recommend starting with this. Oh, the wind. It's so windy. Either starting with this album for the more balanced approach they took, or maybe the one before this. Romantic Warrior, if you're really into progressive rock, I would recommend starting off with that album to segue yourself in. But if you're more of a conventional music listener, like classic rock, jazz, stuff like that, this album is a great place to start because it has the best of all the different worlds. But anyway, guys, that's my little introduction to Return to Forever. Fantastic band, and at this point, they were fully into their electric phase. The first two albums had a completely different lineup. Still had Chick Corea on keyboards and Stanley Clarke on bass. Those are pretty much the two mainstays of the band. But they took a more acoustic Latin approach to their music. It had vocals by Brazilian singer Flora Purim. And it was just a completely different thing. I haven't heard those albums yet. Heard a lot of good things about them, but a totally different style from what they would later adopt. Then with their next album, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, the lineup totally changed. They got guitarist Bill Connors, and they definitely took a more intense approach to their jazz fusion playing, definitely more electric. And yeah, they decided to go this route because Chick Corea was definitely influenced by former Miles Davis alumni John McLaughlin, who had formed the band Mahavishnu Orchestra, another must-hear if you want to get into jazz fusion. And that band there took a very hard-rocking approach to their jazz fusion, very intense and guitar-driven. And yeah, he wanted to go that route as well. So he definitely took a page from the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but again, putting their own spin on it. They didn't just become a rip-off of that band. And again, all these artists, they all knew each other from their time in Miles Davis, and they were all kind of feeding off each other and inspiring each other. So it was this really awesome community of jazz fusion in the early 70s. And yeah, from that lineup came an awesome album, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, which again, you could really see the Mahavishnu Orchestra influence there with the intense electric guitar playing and the long instrumental passages. But again, it wasn't just a rip-off of that band. I mean, they did a lot of different things. There was still a very melodic album, a lot of beautiful sections, and obviously much more keyboard-oriented than Mahavishnu Orchestra. But they were doing things in a different way, which was definitely inspired by that band. So fantastic album, and it did very well. It was their best-selling album at that point. But unfortunately, Billy Connors left the band, or fortunately, depending on who you prefer, him or Al Di Meola, because he didn't really like traveling, and he wanted to focus on a solo career. So probably a shitty career move right there, because Return to Forever would go on to become very, very successful. So he was out of the band, and in comes Al Di Meola, a 19-year-old. I can't believe this, a 19-year-old prodigy, and this guy here is just honestly one of the most well-rounded guitar players of all time. Again, very similar to John McLaughlin from Mahavishnu Orchestra. He could play those, really melodic guitar hooks, but then also just shred the shit out of that guitar, playing with the utmost intensity. But he's a little bit different. He has a little bit more of a Latin-inspired playing style, and I find that his solos and riffs on the album, he uses a lot of the fuzz on it, and he's very funky, definitely funkier than John McLaughlin, who could definitely pull out some funky-ass riffs, but Al Di Meola just really brought the funk into the band with his guitar playing. And there's so much passion behind it, kind of reminding me of Carlos Santana at points. Again, very melodic and beautiful when he wants to be. So just one of the most well-rounded guitar players, and honestly, one of my favorites. When he's shredding, he's right up there with John McLaughlin. But when he plays like the more tender moments on the album, you could really tell that this guy is just in a league of his own. And that's the thing, when John McLaughlin gets into more tender sections, not to get off into a Mahavishnu Orchestra sidetrack here, it's usually acoustic. But Al Di Meola could evoke those same emotions with the electric guitar, which is really cool. And he's just an overall more melodic player than John McLaughlin, who really goes for the stratosphere at points. So a huge addition to the album and a core part of that sound. Another big change here was Chick Corea, he really started using the synths on this album. I think he used synthesizer a little bit on the previous one, but mostly it was electric piano, giving it that very kind of, standard, classic, early 70s jazz fusion sound. But when he got into the synthesizers, oh my god, guys, he really, crafted and welded this unique sound for Return to Forever that became a signature part of their overall sound. And, man, one of the greatest synth players of all time. He never sounds, when he's playing, okay, at first listen, it might sound a little bit overbearing, especially on the album Romantic Warrior, because he really goes all out on the synthesizers. But on this album, he strikes the perfect balance and the perfect amount of restraint, where he really uses them to the fullest effect, and it never sounds grating, it never sounds annoying to the ears. He's always, whenever he's playing on the synth, it always has purpose. Whereas sometimes you hear some people soloing, and it just sounds, overly spacey, overly kind of just too much, just synthesizer overload. On this album, it's the perfect balance between the synthesizer and the electric piano. So a masterclass in that playing. And again, on Romantic Warrior, he strikes a balance as well, but definitely geared more towards the prog rock kind of synth compositions. And yeah, so that was another big change for the album. And his synth playing is absolutely beautiful. And often, you would think like the electric piano would create a lot of that atmosphere, but often at times the synthesizer is what's really creating those beautiful melodic standout moments on the album. So, you wouldn't really expect that, but on this album, that's what you get. So really a lot of amazing changes in the band, and this was their most successful album yet. It went to number 32 on the Billboard charts, which was very good for a jazz fusion album at the time. And yeah, and the band were off to the races, releasing 3 classic albums in a row. I haven't heard the middle one yet, No Mystery, but this one and Return to Forever, Romantic Warrior, are just absolute classics in the genre. And yeah, and you know what? Another thing you got to mention about this band is that all the members were strong songwriters. In Mahavishnu Orchestra, and again, sorry to keep making those comparisons, all those tracks were mainly written by John McLaughlin, and I know it's jazz fusion, I know they all contribute, but the main melodies were written by McLaughlin. On this album here, you get tracks written by Lenny White, you get tracks written by Stanley Clarke, obviously Chick Corea doing like the heavy lifting. He's always been the main composer of the band. And Al Di Meola didn't write any tracks, but he would later on, and he's a fantastic writer as well. So yeah, awesome album. I should also mention Lenny White on the drums. I mentioned Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea, and Al Di Meola, but Lenny White on the fucking drums and percussion, just a fantastic player. I love his Latin influence playing, a very distinctive drummer, and a virtuoso with that. So just one of the best 4-piece jazz fusion bands. I don't know what else to say about it. And they were at the height of their powers at this point. So yeah, now let's get into the overall review of this thing, guys. All right, guys, so let's review this album. And, when I do these album reviews, I always try to get across, like, the gist of it. Like, what is the sound of this album? What makes you want to keep coming back? What sets it apart from the other albums in the band's discography and other bands in the same genre? Well, with Where Have I Known You Before, it's a very distinctive album in Return to Forever's discography, as I already mentioned. This album here, again, just strikes the perfect balance, and balance is really the key word for this entire review. Everything on this album just never feels like too much or never feels like too little. It's just the perfect amount of everything. And what I mean by that is, it's so easy as a jazz fusion band full of just these insane virtuosos to just go off into these long extended solos and forget about like the main melodies of the tracks. But Return to Forever, and this album in particular, every single song has a main theme that gets reprised throughout the entire track. But not just a main theme, a fucking strong main theme. I noticed that a lot of these jazz fusion bands, when they do have main themes, or kind of like the repeating part of the track, the riff, if you want to call it that, it's usually like weaker than the solos, and it's just really a segue to kind of split up the solos. But with Return to Forever, I noticed that the main melodies of the songs are almost like the highlights of the track. It's what they really focus on, and the solos are kind of secondary to it. Again, that's just my opinion, and there's lots of exceptions, like the title track from Romantic Warrior. It's all about the solos, and the main theme just kind of breaks it apart. But with this album here, they're really putting a lot of effort into composing, really writing really, really memorable themes. And Often they're very beautiful. So that's what you're going to get with this album, along with the awesome virtuosity. Again, if you're a fan of Mahavishnu Orchestra, don't worry. There's a lot of just absolutely shredding guitar solos and synth and keyboard solos on the album for you. But I think compositionally, Return to Forever is just on a totally different level. I mean, their compositions are just so memorable. And you could tell, oftentimes they're not taking themselves too seriously. A lot of the main melodies are really playful and joyous and catchy. But on this album here, there's just some absolutely beautiful themes, absolutely melodic, and just such a warm feeling you get when you listen to this album. This album's like a warm, fuzzy hug at points, especially the intro to the epic 14-minute track, Song for the Pharaoh Kings, parts of Balkan Worlds, parts of Shadow of Low. I mean, there's just so many just beautiful moments, really driven by Chick Corea's amazing synth and electric piano with that warm, fuzzy sound. It's just absolutely fantastic. So they struck a perfect balance there. As well, the structure of the album in general. It's composed of one long 14-minute track ending off the album, so you get the big epic slice of excellence at the end there. Two longer 8-minute tracks, a few shorter, like 3-4 minute tunes, and some interludes that kind of break up the action on the album. And these interludes here, they're just very, basically just Chick Corea compositions on the piano. We got Where Have I Known You Before, the title track, Where Have I Loved You Before, and Where Have I Danced With You Before. And they kind of repeat themselves. They kind of show their faces periodically throughout the album, just as palate cleansers with these nice little delicate piano melodies that never go on for longer than 2 minutes. I think the longest one is about 2.5 minutes. And it's just great. It keeps things cohesive and fresh and just really links the album together. The tracks on this album, guys, are very dynamic. I mean, you're never staying in the same mood for very long. They're always just changing from, melodic and beautiful to absolutely intense and funky at points. That's another big thing. The funk is really driven to the max on this album. A lot of funky bass and guitar playing on this thing from Al Di Meola. There was a little bit on the last album and a little bit on the albums to come, but this album here has a lot of those funky grooves. So another thing to love about the album. But yeah, again, the tracks never stay in the same place for long is what I'm trying to say. Case in point, the 8-minute track Shadow of Low, comprised by Stanley Clarke, really just goes through everything. It starts off just so slow, beautiful, melodic, relaxing, and later on gets really intense and then really funky at the end of the track with a great swing to it. And it just seamlessly transitions. It's never jarring. And really, a lot of the other jazz fusion bands, sure, they would do a funk track once in a while. They would do an intense track. Like, look at Mahavishnu Orchestra. They do an acoustic number every once in a while. But they never really combined it all into one single song. And that's where Return to Forever comes in. They combined all these styles, all these moods into one track. And just perfectly. It never feels like there's ever a jarring transition on the album. So just masters of songwriting. And I guess that's where the progressive rock comparison comes in. A lot of people in the progressive rock community seem to really love this band. And I think that's the reason. Their song structures are very interesting and very intricate. And don't really kind of distance themselves from jazz, where there's basically the main theme and then solo A followed by the main theme, then solo B. They really don't stick to that kind of classic jazz fusion formula. And that's what I love about them. And some of the tracks on the album don't even really have solos. Like a couple of them are just all kind of compositions. And that's what I love about it. And really, you can look at all of the jazz fusion bands, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Herbie Hancock, Brand X. Whenever they get into a solo, that instrument that's soloing takes center stage. But with Return to Forever, even when there's a solo, the stuff going on in the background isn't just simply supporting that soloist. It's doing its own thing. It's doing its own melody. It's progressing. And that's what I love about it. And, for a band that was formed by a keyboard player and really led by a keyboard player, sure, the sound is going to rely heavily on that. And, you can't really strip that apart. But the guitar, bass, and drums all just meld perfectly into that keyboard playing, where you can't really say that, Chick Corea is showing off, even though he does get into those extravagant solos. Everything that's going on in the background adds just as much to the song as that keyboard solo, and it gives the song a really cohesive feel, and really just shows that this was really a band. This wasn't just, a band leader and then a bunch of guys just doing what they wanted in the background. These guys really collaborated, and again, with multiple writers in the band, it's easy to see. But yeah, absolutely incredible. And, if you're a fan of Romantic Warrior, you're going to notice that the band really goes off into like the progressive rock kind of territory where, just crazy time changes all over the place and less emphasis on the solos, more emphasis on the time changes and, the main melodies of the track. And if you go back to Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, you're going to notice it's more focused on the solos. So again, balance. This album here is the perfect balance. And it just has this atmosphere to it. Again, that warm, fuzzy atmosphere that runs through it really sets this album apart. And I can't describe it any other way, as well as the funkiness. I'd say those are the two main kind of distinguishing features of the album. Absolutely great. So I really don't know what else to say about it. Everyone is at the top of their game on this album, performance-wise. The synthesizer never sounds overbearing. Al Di Meola, just absolutely perfect, shredding or just supporting the song as needed. Stanley Clarke with his fuzzy bass tones plays some fantastic solos. Of course, his writing is amazing. And Lenny White with his awesome drumming and percussion. Again, his percussion is very Latin influenced, and the whole album overall does have a Latin kind of vibe to it. Very passionate, very kind of Spanish sounding because of Lenny White's drumming and percussion. So just so much going on, so many different influences here. And I guess, that's a product of the album being released in 1974, where they really had the luxury of hearing all of the early 70s jazz fusion bands and just combining it into one. Kind of like what Brand X did in England, but they were a little bit later. And of course, this album here is definitely more keyboard-oriented than Brand X. So that's just another... It's impossible not to make comparisons when talking about jazz fusion because all of these bands just fed off each other so much. But yeah, an incredible album, so well composed, never really gets off into like crazy improv sections, has a warm feel to it, some amazing synthesizer playing, it's got the funk, it's got the intense solos, just one of the most, and the structure of the album, again, is just perfect. I mean, nothing ever goes on too long, you got the short songs spaced out, you get the long songs perfectly spaced, great pace throughout the album as well, and then that epic slice of goodness at the end with, Song for the Pharaoh Kings is just all you can possibly ask for a jazz fusion album. So honestly, guys, a stone cold masterpiece. I don't hesitate to say it. One of my all-time favorite jazz fusion albums. And, if you're getting into this genre, this is a must listen, guys. Again, it might take a little bit longer to get into compared to Romantic Warrior or the one that came before it, Hymn for the Seventh Galaxy, depending on the kind of person you are. Again, if you're more prog-oriented, Romantic Warrior is going to be your go-to. If you're more just straight-up jazz or jazz fusion-oriented, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. But this album here is a must-listen for all of those fans. So go out and listen to Where Have I Known You Before. Now let's talk about the album track by track. Alright guys, transition to the great outdoors. Sorry about that, I just like to switch up the scenery every now and then. Because I don't like being cooped up indoors. But yeah, guys, let's talk about this album track by track. And kicking it off, we have just an incredible song. I can't say enough about this thing, guys. Track number 1, Balkan Worlds, is arguably the best song on this entire album. It's personally my second favorite, but if someone were to say that Balkan Worlds was their number 1, I wouldn't be able to argue with them. It's that fantastic. And it was a track written by Stanley Clarke. And again, we can't underestimate the songwriting capabilities of the members of this band. Again, when you think of Return to Forever, you think of it as Chick Corea's band. The frickin' album cover even says Return to Forever featuring Chick Corea. It's kind of marketed that he's the star of the show, he's writing everything. But Stanley Clarke, Lenny White, Al Di Meola, they were all fantastic writers. And Balkan Worlds is one of their most well-crafted tracks. I mean, this song really has it all. I love Return to Forever, how hardworking these guys are compared to other jazz fusion bands. Normally, when a jazz fusion band lands on a fantastic melody, a strong central theme to a track, they really let that play out, and they use it to kind of, as segues between the improv, segues between the solos. But Return to Forever doesn't do that. Again, I already mentioned earlier in the review that these guys here are really focused on the songwriting, and this track here doesn't have 1, doesn't have 2, doesn't have 3, but arguably has 4 to 5 very strong motifs that repeat throughout the track. And again, any other jazz fusion band would have used each of these different themes to craft its own individual song. So Balkan Worlds could have been expanded into an entire album if you throw in a few more solos here and there. But no, Return to Forever, they give you the all-you-can-eat buffet crammed into this tight, compact 8-minute track. and it never feels like too much. The transitions are so smooth, and it's just so well done. I don't know what else to say about it. And not only that, but you do get three fantastic solos on the track. Chick Corea, Al Di Meola on guitar, followed by Stanley Clarke, just with an amazing fuzzy bass solo. It's absolutely incredible. And this song really takes you on a journey. There's just so many themes. It's so playful at points. It's so funky at points. A lot of funk here with Al Di Meola's, again, funk-styled rhythm guitar playing. And Lenny White, holy shit, guys. He's just playing his ass off throughout the entire track. He sounds really busy, and he adds a lot of bells and chimes and all kinds of percussion there. But, you know, at some points, it just adds this beautiful touch to the music. Like, one of the main themes that comes in earlier in the track is really made by Lenny White's bells and chimes in the background. It's just absolutely beautiful. And Chick Corea's synthesizer playing, especially his solo, is just absolutely unique. It almost sounds like a saxophone at points. So you don't really get that shrill, kind of jarring, high-pitched sax sound that comes in here. Here on this album, and this song in particular, Chick Corea makes his synthesizer sound more like a sax, or more like one of those woodwind one of those instruments. You guys know what I'm talking about. Reed instruments, that's it. Sorry, my music theory is very shit. but yeah, his solo's fantastic there. And Al Di Meola's solo starts off really kind of, for lack of a better word, all over the place, but then it really congeals and gets extremely passionate and just so intense at the end that you feel like you're listening to a John McLaughlin solo. The bass solo, again, is just so tasty. You know, Stanley Clarke doesn't mess around with any of those gimmicks like, you know, bass harmonics and things like that. Not that they're gimmicks. I absolutely love the sound of, you know, harmonics on the bass. But he's just this tight bass player that just lashes it out on his bass. And it's an incredible solo. And I love that little busy theme that kind of breaks up the entire track. Where, I love that busy theme that kind of breaks up the... Okay, something's going on here, guys. I love the busy theme that kind of breaks up the track, and Lenny White's bass is just going nuts in the background. I mean, this guy just definitely doesn't fuck around. Like, he gets to the point on his bass, and he's definitely one of the more aggressive, virtuosic bass players I've heard in jazz fusion. His sound is just larger than life and fuzzy as hell, and you gotta love it. And I love his little bass riff that kind of breaks up the solos on the song. Kind of another, whoa, it's the 4th of July in fucking Canada, and people are using fireworks. I don't understand. But yeah, his bass kind of riff breaking up the solos is also fantastic there, with Lenny White's fast and furious drumming. I just love how the song just kind of culminates in this awesome kind of warm feeling electric piano and guitar kind of build up at the end. It's absolutely beautiful, and it builds up with the synth, creating such a feel-good kind of... Holy shit, there it goes again. Such a feel-good atmosphere. Kind of like the beginning of the track, which had this, that signature warm electric piano tone I was telling you guys about earlier. And the closing of the song reprises that section, but with the guitar in the background, it just gives it this climactic kind of feel. Absolutely beautiful. Such a great ending to the track. And, you know, I just love the whole thing. I love the seamless transitions between the solos. I love the 2-minute intro, which really plays on all kinds of different themes, like the funkiness. We got this. There's also this awesome keyboard build-up kind of section that builds the tension throughout the track. The with the chimes in the background, which I was kind of alluding to earlier on. That theme there is really cool as well. And I don't know. There's just so much going on in this track. Again, they could have split this song up and made an entire album with the amount of memorable themes on this thing. And it's just one of my all-time favorite jazz fusion tracks. Easily a 10 out of 10. Masterpiece. And then we get the next track on the album. The first of the 3 main interlude tracks. Those little Chick Corea piano compositions I was telling you guys about. And this one here is called Where Have I Loved You Before? It's literally 1 minute of just Chick Corea on solo piano, unaccompanied, playing this elegant, beautiful kind of piano melody. And really this awesome melody comes in at the 40-second mark. That's just so elegant and beautiful. And again, a great palate cleanser between the longer tracks on the album. So don't really have much more to say about it, but it's a great track and really gives the album the cohesion with these little interlude pieces. So for what it is, I would easily give this track an 8.5 out of 10. Now we get the next main track on the album, another 7.5 to 8 minute classic track, The Shadow of Low. And just like the first track here, this song wasn't written by Chick Corea. It was written by Lenny White, the drummer. And, whenever you hear a drummer writing a track, you're going to expect like an extravagant drum solo, just something really percussive. But this track here is arguably like the least percussive track on the entire album, which just shows that Lenny White was just a fantastic composer in and of itself, and such a great talent. A fantastic song. Like, it's a little bit less busy than Balkan Worlds, which just had so much going on, so many main themes, that if I were to really dive deep into that song, it would take an hour to get into. But Shadow of Low is a more digestible song. It comes in 3 distinct sections, but again, very, very dynamic. I mean, once you get to the end of the track, it's hard to believe that, the way it started is part of the same song, because it goes through all these different emotions, 3 distinct sections, and the transitions, again, guys, they're just so seamless, where it doesn't feel like this was just 3 songs they glued together. It feels like one cohesive piece. And again, Lenny White's restraint on this track is absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's never going over the board with busy drumming like he was on Balkan Worlds or any crazy percussion. It's just a fantastic song that puts the melodies first. And really, I don't think there's any solos in this track whatsoever. I mean, there's a lot of like parts where the keyboard shines or the guitar stands out. But overall, it's just all about the main themes and the compositions and the interplay between the instruments. Again, no one instrument really shines at any given point. Everything just fits into place. So this track here, the first section, is this amazing 1 minute, elegant, warm electric piano section that really just leads in perfectly from the previous track. It's hard to really distinguish like when that track ends and when this one starts, because it has that beautiful laid-back melody. But then before you know it, it gets into like the main theme of the first 3 minutes of the track, which is just this really feel-good, kind of sit back and relax, beautiful, beautiful melody with the guitar. Again, really melodic, and it takes its time to develop. And this is something you didn't really see on the last album. The last album was just this busy jazz fusion album where the band was just soloing all over the place. This one here just really locks into this fucking relaxing, feel-good, atmospheric melody. And it's just absolutely beautiful. And the guitar is just really just singing and taking its time to develop and just create these fucking freaking emotions. And it's just awesome. The synthesizer playing as well is just top notch. And I love how it kind of trades off between the synthesizer playing the main theme and the guitar playing the main theme. Really just showing 2 sides of the same coin there with different kind of sounds. You gotta love it. But then, at about the 3 minute mark, the song really just starts accelerating and picking up the pace. And I love that transition. The guitar just starts just shredding all over the place. And the interplay with the synthesizer is just really cool. We get these fuzzy, again, the fuzz tone on the guitar is fantastic. And furious guitar runs, but it still has this strong melody. And again, the trade-off with the synthesizer and guitar sections it's just perfect. And you really can't pinpoint the guitar as being like a guitar solo. There's like these nice like 10-15 second furious guitar runs alternating with synthesizer. So it's just really this great trade-off. Then at the 5 minute mark, we get into the third section of the track, which is this really just sleazy, kind of swinging, funky melody with the fuzz bass and guitar. It's absolutely awesome. And then we get into this almost Herbie Hancock level, Headhunters era funk groove. Just funk to the max. Absolutely funky as fuck. And then we get into the awesome kind of swinging melody at the end, which is amazing because you could swear this band has a horn section, but really it's just Chick Corea's amazing synthesizer playing, emulating the sound of a swinging horn section there. And it just has this awesome feel to it. And there's these fast guitar runs over it as always. Again, Al Di Meola with his fast and furious playing. You wouldn't think it would work with this kind of swinging synthesizer part, but it absolutely does. And it just gives the song this really kind of joyful, playful ending. And you think to yourself, like, holy shit, this song started off with this beautiful harmonic piano solo, and now we're getting into this, and it just really goes to show how progressive these guys were, and how complex their songwriting was. So Shadow of Low, easily a 9.5 out of 10, maybe even a 10 out of 10. But, I would say it's just, I like Balkan Worlds a little bit better. So let's just stick with a 9.5. But one of the best songs on the album. Right, then after that one, we get the second of Chick Corea's solo piano pieces, Where Have I Danced With You Before? And this one here, it's another 1 minute kind of interlude track on the album. Very playful, definitely a more playful piano piece than the intro. Than the first segue kind of track, Where Have I Loved You Before? But this one here does have like a little bit of a touch of melancholy to it, which is pretty cool. And just shows that Chick Corea is just one of the greatest piano players of all time. Again, I don't really have much more to say about it. It's great. It's easily an 8.5 out of 10. Then the next track on the album, we get Return to the Seventh Galaxy. That's right, guys. It's a sequel to the title track of the previous album, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. And you know what? The title couldn't be more fitting because this really is beyond the Seventh Galaxy in the sense that it's just such an improvement over the title track on the previous album. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a great song, but this one here is just so much more multifaceted. There's so much more going on this track, and really, I think it's the addition of Chick Corea's amazing synthesizer playing that, again, sounds like a saxophone that really elevates this track, and the climactic guitar playing of Al Di Meola that just has so much feel, so much passion to it. Whereas Billy Connors on the previous track, he was more of a shredding kind of soloist and gave it that hard rocking feel. This one here is a little bit more atmospheric, a little bit more melodic, but it really does have the main theme of that track, which is just absolutely incredible, really tension laden and anxiety ridden as well. And you gotta love Lenny White's just fast and furious drumming on that main theme, just giving it that tense kind of frantic vibe to it. But you really gotta love the slower, more melodic sections to it that have so much weight, and the awesome build-ups in this song are fantastic as well. Now we're kind of really lacking on Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. Now I know there's no point of comparing the two; they're both great tracks, but you just can't help but think that this is a much better track than Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, at least in my opinion. And again, it has that warm kind of electric piano feeling that goes through the entire album, which I love, which gives the album that unique flavor. And I love how during like the more intense guitar sections, we do get that warm piano playing, which it shouldn't work together, but it absolutely does. So yeah, Return to the Seventh Galaxy, just a great, short, sweet 3.5 minute track on the album. But definitely not an interlude song like Where Have I Danced With You Before. This one here is a fully fledged composition. And again, just like Shadow Low, there's barely, I can't even think of one solo in the entire song. It's just such a cohesive piece of music. And this is a track I would definitely give a 9.5 out of 10. It's one of the shorter ones on the album, but definitely no worse than some of the longer tracks, so totally justified. Next up, we got another one of the shorter tracks on the album. Awesomely titled song, Earth Juice. And this track here is pretty different from the rest of the album. It's a little bit more similar to the interlude tracks in where it doesn't really change much. It doesn't really have much variation throughout. And for that reason, if I had to single out my least favorite song on the album, it will be this one, other than the interlude tracks, obviously. But that's not saying much because this song here is still fantastic. I love how it just opens up with this funky bass groove and just the rhythm guitar and the gentle electric piano that, again, just represents the core sound of this entire album. Just a very cool intro. But then at the 47-second mark, it locks into the main theme where the guitar just takes prominence. And it's basically this guitar riff that just plays throughout the entire track. But the rhythm section is fantastic with the almost Latin samba-inspired drumming and the funky bass groove growing throughout the whole thing. And this just really just singing guitar melody. I mean, Al Di Meola just sounds like he's just singing to the heavens. And it's just this really passionate riff that kind of just repeats throughout the entire track. Sure, you got a little bit of keyboard, you got a little bit of synthesizer coming in, but really it's just that riff. And, people might think it's a bit repetitive, but it just builds and builds, and it gets pretty intense near the end. I don't think it's repetitive because it's only 3.5 minutes. But really, that's all this song is. It's just an awesome, climactic, melodic guitar riff going throughout the entire track with this awesome samba/funk groove going on in the background. Just epic song. Earth Juice, I don't know, what would I give this one out of 10? Maybe a 9? Yeah, I think a 9 out of 10. I wouldn't give it a 9.5, but for what it is, it's a fantastic track. And yeah, we're almost there, guys. Just got the epic to go, and then one more song coming before it. So let's dive right in. Next up, we got the third and final piano interlude by Chick Corea, the title track of the album, Where Have I Known You Before? And this one here is just a beautiful piece of music. It's the longest of the interludes, coming in at 2.5 minutes, and definitely the most beautiful. For that reason, it's my favorite of the three. And you gotta love Chick Corea, how he kind of layers the keyboards, the multi-track in here, where you kind of get like the backup rhythm piano, if you want to call it that, with Chick Corea just kind of soloing on top of that. And it's just such a beautiful melody, a beautiful tune. Really don't have much more to say about it. It's just easily a 9 out of 10. It has the slight edge over the other ones. But yeah, just beautiful, nice palate cleanser before diving into the 14-minute epic. So without further ado, let's get into that track. And finally, guys, we finally get to it, the closing 14.5-minute magnum opus. And that's honestly what it is, guys, a fucking magnum opus. Song to the Pharaoh Kings. Just Chick Corea's huge monolith of a track closing out the album. And my personal favorite song, arguably my personal favorite song by the entire band, right up there with the title track of Romantic Warrior. I might give that one a slight edge over this one, but it's damn close. And what I love about this track is that, every single second is justified. It never feels over long. And this song here puts melody first. It really proves that Chick Corea, not only was he the king of chops, right along with Herbie Hancock on the piano, I mean, just a virtuoso, the very definition of a virtuoso. But he really puts the atmospheres and melodies first, because although he does solo a lot on this track, his melodies and the atmosphere he creates with his synths and keyboards are just second to none. And one of the most atmospheric tracks on the entire album, one of the most atmospheric tracks in jazz fusion, without wandering into that spacey avant-garde kind of free-form shit. This is very tightly structured. And, it's hard to believe, but Al Di Meola doesn't even really he does next to nothing for, like, a huge majority of the track until, like, the 8-minute mark, believe it or not. Up till then, it really is dominated by the synthesizer and the rhythm section, which is incredible. The rhythm section on this track is just, holy shit, guys, just totally steals the show at some points. But yeah, Al Di Meola doesn't really come in until, like, the 8-minute mark, and, you're not really missing him, to be honest, because everything just fits so well. But when he does come in, it's one of those powerful moments where just this melody just comes in and just sucks you into this hypnotic kind of solo that just builds and intensifies. And, just really shows a lot of admirable restraint. And I know he was 19 years old. I know he was the new guy in the band. But, he really didn't feel the need to, I wasn't there when they recorded this track, but he probably willingly kind of backed out of the first 8 minutes of the track, knowing that it was Chick Corea's thing. And, he really knew Chick Corea had to shine for the first 8 minutes of the song. So just shows a lot of admirable restraint from Al Di Meola. And what can you say about Song for the Pharaoh Kings? It has Egyptian, Middle Eastern vibes to it. It has Latin vibes, especially with Lenny White's Latin percussion during this track. Holy shit. It even has like a samba section in the middle. No flamenco guitar playing, but that doesn't really matter. And it's intense, it's beautiful at points, well, for a huge part of the track. And again, it never feels like any time is wasted. Like every second of this track really, really means something. And yeah, one of the best songs that this band ever came up with, right up there with Balkan Worlds, and I already mentioned Return to Romantic Warrior. So anyway, guys, so this song here, you could really divide it up into 3 or maybe even 4 chunks. The first 2 chunks of the track are dominated by Chick Corea. The third chunk is more of Al Di Meola's kind of thing, where he's shining on the guitar, and the fourth goes right back into Chick Corea's synthesizer and jazzy keyboard playing, probably the most conventional jazz moment on the entire album. But really, for me, what really steals the show on this track is the intro. This beautiful, almost 2.5-minute, warm-sounding, fuzzy organ in the background with Chick Corea's amazing synth playing over it. And the atmosphere that this section evokes is second to none. It feels like you're standing on the Great Pyramid of Giza, just staring over the desert. And his synth solo here just sounds sounds otherworldly. Again, it sounds like a reed instrument, like some kind of Egyptian, Middle Eastern reed instrument. And it's just absolutely beautiful, and it never feels overlong at 2.5 minutes. But then we get more of his prog rock sounding spacey synth coming in. The drums kick in, and it gets into a more tense melody. Things really start to intensify, and the tension really mounts, and it just has this drive to it, this kind of power to it. And after that, like nice, relaxing, atmospheric intro, this part here really gets your blood pumping. It's a really climactic part of the track. Then at the 4-minute mark, right at the height of the tension, Chick Corea comes in with another awesome synthesizer solo. This one here is much more up-tempo, fast-paced. And this is when you really start noticing the power of the rhythm section on this track with Lenny White's Latin-inspired percussion and Stanley Clarke's bass just really driving it, really giving it that backbone it needs. And again, it's easy for a jazz soloist to just take over, but here you're kind of divided between the rhythm section and the synthesizer playing. They all come together so perfectly. And then after that solo, it gets into this awesome kind of samba section, and it feels like we just traveled from the deserts of ancient Egypt to the heat of Mexico, or Nicaragua, or somewhere in Latin America. And it's just an awesome change of tone that's fantastic. And of course, the bass and drumming here is just stellar, absolutely stellar. So we get that for about a minute or so. Then at around the 5-minute, 50-second mark, it kind of winds down. And I kind of forgot about this section at first, but we get another amazing bass solo by Stanley Clarke. It starts off really subtle, but then it builds up just like his solo on Balkan Worlds. And it's a really passionate, really melodic solo. And, he doesn't rely on those gimmicks like the bass harmonics and things like that. It's just a powerful melodic bass solo that goes on for, I think, about a minute or so, and the keys underneath are just great. Got the electric piano going. Just so passionate and climactic for a bass solo. Just proving Stanley Clarke is just one of the masters there. And, the song, it kind of gets into this melody, this climactic melody after that solo that makes you think the track is going to end. But holy shit, guys, there's still another, 8 minutes to go or so. At the 7-minute, 45-second mark, the synth melody comes in. And this is just a major shift in the whole tone of the track. Kind of, I don't know, some people might consider this the main theme of the second half with the and it starts off with the synth, but then you're going to notice Al Di Meola suddenly sneaks into the track with his kind of rhythm guitar style in the background, but then he ends up taking the lead and playing that main theme on his guitar, and it's just absolutely hypnotic and beautiful. And again, he trades off with Chick Corea, and they unite at one point, the synth and the guitar just screaming that powerful main theme. Then Al Di Meola kicks into his guitar solo. It starts off really fuzzy, has that heavy edge to it, and the synth in the background is really funky, and it just builds, intensifies, and the music in the background is, again, just like Chick Corea's solo earlier on, is just as important as Al Di Meola's solo. And he just makes it sing with so much passion and Latin flair that it makes you feel like you're listening to like Carlos Santana at points. Very, very similar style. Then at the 10-minute mark onward, we get into what I consider the fourth part of the song, where Chick Corea takes the helm again. So again, Al Di Meola really has just that 2.5 minutes to shine, but this really was like Chick Corea's magnum opus, and it gets back into the main melody with the guitar coming over and kind of climaxing at this point. Then at the 10-minute, 30-second mark, I know there's a lot going on, guys. It's hard to keep track. That's why I got my notes here. We get into a jazzy electric piano solo. Very warm, but very jazzy. And this is very similar to something like Herbie Hancock would do. One of the more conventional jazz fusion solos on the album, with the samba shuffle in the background and the funky guitar, just absolutely killing it. And we get into a second synth extravaganza from Chick Corea later on the song, right before the climax, before the not the climax, but the resolution of the track, which briefly reprises the intro with that warm Egyptian sounding synth theme. So really the last 4 minutes of the song is just Chick Corea going all out there. But Al Di Meola's amazing rhythm guitar playing in that whole funky groove that the band's laying down in the background, just freaking incredible. So this song here, what's there to say about it? I mean, just from describing it, every single part of this song is just memorable and melodic and atmospheric. That's the main thing. It's an atmospheric track. And it might take a few listens to fully absorb, fully understand the transitions and everything. But once it does, I swear to God, guys, this will be one of your all-time favorite jazz fusion songs. I mean, how could it not be? So, Song to the Pharaoh Kings. It's obvious. It's a 10 out of 10. It's a highlight in this entire genre. You guys have to get this album for this track alone. It's worth the price of admission. So, incredible. And there we have it, guys. That's the end of the album. Where Have I Known You Before? Again, I said it in the beginning, but if you're just getting into this band and you're you have a well-rounded music taste, you like prog, you like funk, you like jazz fusion, this is the album really to start with, because this album has it all. Again, if you're more into the prog stuff, start with Romantic Warrior. If you're more into conventional jazz fusion stuff, start with Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. But this one here is just a perfect unison of all of that shit, and just a really cohesive, perfectly composed album with, again, two of the all-time greats in the entire genre, Balkan Worlds and Return of the Pharaoh Kings, or Song to the Pharaoh Kings, sorry. But with tracks like Return to the Seventh Galaxy, Shadow of Low, and like all the interlude tracks on the album, you can't go wrong. Every single track is a highlight. Every single track is a masterpiece. And it's a must listen, guys. So don't even think twice about hearing this album. It's a standard. It's like you have to have this in your jazz fusion collection if you're a collector. So that's it, guys. That's all I got to say about it. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Sorry about all the fucking noises and shit in the background. It was the 4th of July today, so I don't know why everyone was doing fireworks. We just had Canada Day like fucking a few days ago. July 1st, if you guys are watching, is Canada Day if you're watching from the States. So pretty close to the 4th of July. So I don't know if they were just extending their Canada Day fireworks, but anyway, I haven't rewatched the video, so if it's so loud and obnoxious in the background, I apologize. But yeah, I just don't like being cooped up inside all day. Anyway, guys, I'm ranting. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely more Return to Forever and Jazz Fusion reviews coming your way. If you guys have any recommendations, you guys always know I appreciate it in the comment section down below. I might not get to it, soon or in a timely fashion, but I will get to it. I promise you guys. If I like a recommendation and I think it's worthy enough to review, then I will review it. So don't hesitate, guys. Thank you again for watching, and take care, guys. Rock on.